but the complete story.
Thanks for staying with us here on World Now. We told you earlier that the coalition of civil society groups have voiced strong concerns over carbon trading, arguing that it doesn't solve the climate crisis, but instead worsens it. We'll talk more on this by speaking with Executive Director, Health of Mother Earth Foundation, Nemo Bassi. Thanks so much for joining us on World Now. Let me first start by asking you to give us a clearer understanding of the issues related to the carbon trading and why does it matter at the COP29?
Thank you very much. The issue of carbon trading has taken center stage because on the very first day of the COP, there was an adoption of aspects of Article 6.4 of the Paris Agreement, which allows for the entry, the use of carbon trading as a major instrument for tackling global warming. Now, the issue is that when somebody has carbon credits, what it actually means is that he can prove that he has a place where carbon is being captured. It could be in trees in a forest, can be mangrove forest, can be normal rainforest, could be some soils or water bodies. And that gives that person, that means you have more carbon, you are capturing more carbon than you are emitting. And then you can sell off the space for which you have not occupied. That means even though you are not polluting, you are not permitting somebody else who is polluting to pollute more, to take up the space that you did not take. This is the whole logic of carbon trading. It's counterintuitive. I mean, it doesn't really solve the problem. It only allows more pollution to go on. But I think why it's attractive is that those who are buying the carbon credit will make some payment. And a lot of the payments being made by those who are buying credits would go to consultants who calculated how much carbon is in the trees, which is highly speculative. And then some may go to the government in whose territory this is being done. Then a trickle will go to communities who are actually being deprived of using their natural resources the way nature has given to them and the way they've been using.
Yeah.
This is a challenge. It doesn't stop global warming. It only allows more pollution to happen.
Interesting. So there at COP29, there has been increased dialogue on the balance between adaptation and mitigation strategies. So from your perspective, are current global efforts skewed heavily towards mitigation at the expense of adaptation, especially for countries most vulnerable to climate impact?
Yes, this is to be expected because the Conference of Parties, the COP scenario, is a place where they exercise on geopolitical power. The more powerful nations will always push what is of more interest to them. Now, adaptation is a system. When we talk about adaptation, we're talking about effort being made so that those who are most impacted, the vulnerable poor countries and communities, can adapt to the problem of flooding, of coastal erosion, of droughts, of water stress, and the rest. Now, the mitigation involves those things that are being done that can be proven to show that they are actually tackling global warming, that they are reducing emissions. And such things are in development of infrastructure, like carbon capture and storage, like geoengineering, and these are all devices that help to permit more pollution while showing that something is being done to absorb the carbon or to store the carbon somewhere and delay the need to eliminate them to future generations. So mitigation is much more attractive because it creates jobs for the industries in the global north, whereas adaptation is the immediate need of poor countries who are facing the crisis.
Interesting stuff. So this year's COP29 has been tagged as a finance COP. So I want to be sure whether you're satisfied with the ongoing negotiations in addressing the climate crisis, or what do you like to see differently?
Well, you know, if you go back in history, for the moment voluntary emission reduction was introduced in 2009 in Copenhagen, the idea was that the developed countries would contribute $100 billion to help the poor countries adapt from 2020. That was not achieved. The deadline was shifted to 2025. And that has not been achieved so far, except that last year we heard that a $100 billion target was reached, but some of the finance was going as loans. So it's not satisfactory to African countries and other countries in the group of 77. which is operating here at the COP. So the group of 77 and China have asked that they should be increased. The target should now be $1.2 trillion. Now, that sounds like a big sum of money. But scientists have calculated that the amount of damage being suffered by vulnerable countries from climate change actually amounts to up to $5 to $6 trillion. So $1.2 trillion will just scratch the problem at the edges. So yes, there's a lot of discussion, but some of us we're not enthusiastic, or we don't think that at the end of the day anything will be done to commensurate to what is needed today.
Interesting stuff. But then, if you look at it, looking ahead, what do you think will be the legacy of COP29? Do you anticipate it will serve as a catalyst for stronger climate action, or are there still major hurdles that could limit its long-term effectiveness?
Well, I don't like to be a pessimist, so I would say that it depends on what this is still the early week, the first week of the COP. So we don't know what may happen in the coming days. We've seen some dramatic things happen already, like Argentina pulling out of this particular COP, which was nobody expected that to happen. So anything could happen. But judging from history and from the body language of what we're reading and what we're hearing here, I believe that opening the floodgates for carbon trading is not a good sign that we're going to have somebody who say, oh, that was a beautiful COP that put the world on the pathway of escaping the crisis. Because just before this COP, United Nations Development Program published a emissions gap and finance gap report that showed that if countries actually do what they promised to do, we are on track to having temperature increases that are far, far above what was established in the Paris Agreement. So yes, unless leaders realize that, look, this is not a time for politics, it's time for fighting for survival of poor people and countries, and that climate change does not really exempt any nation, rich or poor. Unless people hear this and stop denying the impact of global warming and stop delaying action, it may just be another COP out of the 29 that we've had so far.
Interesting stuff. Well, Executive Director, Health of Mother Earth Foundation, Nimo Bassi, thank you so much for your time from there at Baku, Azerbaijan. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now, moving on, Polish and American officials have opened a U.S. missile base in northern Poland, originally intended to defend the West against threats from the Middle East, but now aimed at confronting Russia. The Renewable base, 230 kilometers from the Russian border, has been operational since July, but was officially inaugurated only on Wednesday. First announced in 2009, the project was plagued by delays, and Russia has since emerged as the main security concern for the military alliance's eastern flank. Despite NATO stating that the Renewable facility and a similar system in Romania are purely defensive, Moscow has frequently labeled it a threat. The inauguration comes as Warsaw and its regional allies praise for the U.S. presidency of Donald Trump, who in the past has voiced admiration for Russian President Vladimir Putin.
I am here to almost 5% of GDP committed to defense spending. Poland has taken on an extraordinary leadership role in NATO. It is the model in NATO. Because of all of this, we have been successful in advancing collective defense, which is what NATO is ultimately about. Collective defense works. The NATO alliance has never been stronger, larger, or more united. And Poland is an indispensable ally, partner, and friend of the United States.
And migrant caravan number 13, Christoviv, has arrived in San Pedro Tepanetepec, Oaxaca. It is a group of approximately 500 people that left Tuxtla Gutierrez, Chiapas, and is now heading to Santo Domingo, Zatanepec. The migrants will try to reach the United States before January the 20th of next year, when Donald Trump will be inaugurated as president. U.S. President Joe Biden is expected to meet with families of the remaining American-Israeli hostages held by Hamas in Gaza as a push for the Biden administration and the incoming administration of President-elect Donald Trump to cooperate on securing a hostage release deal. On Tuesday, the families met with U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, urging the Biden administration to work with Trump's transition team to secure a hostage deal before Inauguration Day on January the 20th, 2025. U.S. President Joe Biden hosted Israeli President Isaac Herzog at the White House on Tuesday, where Herzog emphasized the need or the urgent need to prioritize the release of hostages. Negotiations over the hostages have been stalled for months, with neither Hamas or Israel showing willingness to compromise.
Absolutely understanding that with that same energy and investment, President Biden and his team will continue working to gain the release of all the 101 Israeli hostages every moment up until January 20th. On our part, we impressed upon the President, of course, the urgency of getting the hostages home before another rough winter. As hostages, we